Right, it's 7 o'clock. I'm hereby calling the meeting to order. This is the Democracy and Standards Committee of North Northants Council meeting at Corby Cube on Monday the 8th of January 2024. It is an additional meeting that wasn't in the original schedule. I would like to call for 1 minute silence before we start the meeting in honour of Councillor Michael Tebbett, who sadly died, completely shocked to me, last week. Please, I'd like everyone, if they could, to give us a minute's silence. Thank you, everyone. It's very kind of you. Right, can we start with apologies for absence, please?
I've had apologies from Councillor Jelly and Councillor Todd.
Thank you. Right, are there any declarations of interest by members? I see none. Let it be noted in the minutes, please. Right, now the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 20th of November 2023 in this same chamber. Are there any errors or significant omissions of fact that anybody would like to point out? Okay, well then, is it your wish that I sign them as a true and correct record? All those in favour? Thank you. I'll sign them. Okay, thank you. Thank you, members. Right, now the next item on the agenda is item 4, which is proposed revisions of the Constitution for the Audit and Governance Committee's terms of reference. Would you like to lead on it?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I would first like to introduce myself. I'm Camilla Coulson-Patel, the Chief Lawyer at North Northants. Part of my role is to support the Monitoring Officer in relation to standards and governance. So thank you for having me in attendance this evening to present these reports. The first report that I have for you this evening is the proposed revisions to the Constitution. That is shown at pages 9 through to 18 of your reports pack. Members, I trust that you've had the opportunity to read those reports in advance, so I do not intend to rehearse the full details of that this evening, but I would like to take you through a few points. The audit and governance terms of reference have been in place since vesting day. The Monitoring Officer, in conjunction with the Chief Internal Auditor, conducted a routine review of the terms of reference for that committee and identified a number of changes to be made to reflect the local arrangements and CIPFA Position Statement 2022. This report was considered by colleagues at the Constitution Working Group on the 18th of December, and they were happy to recommend this for your approval and consideration this evening. The details of the changes which are to be made to the terms of reference are shown at pages 13 to 15 of your reports pack. The changes are shown in red, and the proposed amendments details are shown at pages 17 and 18, Appendix B, which record the reasons for the changes, which members will note, are predominantly formatting, revised wording to reflect the SIPFA guidance, and revised wording to reflect the local arrangements. Whilst the changes to be made are not considered to be controversial, they are in fact significant and cannot be made under delegated powers by the monitoring officer, and therefore would require consideration by and approval by full council. The recommendations for this report are shown at page 10, paragraph 3 of your reports pack, and it's for you today to review and comment on the proposed revisions of the terms of reference for the Audit and Governance Committee and recommend approval of the revised terms of reference for the Audit and Governance Committee at full council on the 25th of January 2024. Chair, that's an outline of the report, and I'll take any questions members may have.
Thank you. First of all, are there any questions? Councillor Addison.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if there was any feedback from the Chair of Audit.
Thank you. The Chair of this hasn't been presented to Audit Committee. However, the Chair of Audit has been made aware of those changes, as have the Audit Committee. I will add that the Audit Committee are anxious to see the proposals progress, specifically around the recommendation arising from the executive decision in October 2023.
I think it's generally agreed in the audit profession that there is a need for updating this data, and it is filtered through to us, and I think that we really should be accepting it. Are there any further comments? Councillor Brackenbury.
Only that I fully agree, Chair. It ensures compliance, or the changes ensure compliance with the SIP for guidance, so it makes sense to accept the recommendations fully. Thank you.
Councillor Lorman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, obviously I support this. Just slightly off this, and perhaps not one that this officer can answer, but in terms of internal audit, is there a facility, should the audit committee or indeed internal audit need more work done, something than is in the original budget? Is there a facility for them to go out and do additional work? And obviously there's a budget for the internal audit department, but you know, things do crop up and it might need to be external. Is there some facility?
Thank you, Councillor Lorman. That's something I will be able to take away and feedback more generally in future, but what I will say is that the work of the audit does have a standard work programme, and as professional officers they're under an obligation to raise any concerns with the relevant officers and committees as they see fit.
After saying I was going to leave it to Camilla and not speak, I'm speaking, as usual. So, yeah, the work plan has got a number of days. What we can do is we can switch those days around. So if something crops up that's urgent, then we're able to switch them. So we quite often do that. We've also got the capacity for some consultancy days as well if we need to. So it will just be about looking at the work plan and just moving it around as we need to, Councillor.
Does that satisfy you, Councillor Lorman? Okay, are there any other questions or comments from committee members? I see none. Okay, well, let's go then to the recommendations. We have reviewed and commented on the proposed revisions. So that brings us on to B. It is recommended that we recommend approval of the revised terms of reference for the Audit and Governance Committee to go to full council on the 25th of January 2024. I will propose that from the chair. Is there a seconder? Okay, that has been proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Right, that is unanimous. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Local Government Association Civility in Public Life Debate Not Hate campaign. Now, I have to admit that I did not realise that this was being organised by the LGA, but it's something that I feel fairly strongly about. They're referring to intimidation, threats, etc. to councillors. I've had my share of death threats and some pretty nasty stuff. Had to harden my property. If you're an MP, the government pays for the hardening of your property. If you're a councillor, you have to pay for it and you can't reclaim it on expenses. That's a wodge of money that I won't see back. Anyway, would you like to speak, Camilla?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And like many members, the Chair, in expressing this, is a item of much discussion, and it has been for a number of years. So the report arises for the Debate Not Hate campaign and civility in public life. And a copy of that report is in your pack, detailed at pages 19 through to 23, with the appendix being the report of the LGA at pages 25 to 64. This report is to update and inform members on the work of the Local Government Association for the Debate Not Hate campaign and inform further work arising for this council. The campaign itself was launched in 2021, and as part of this work, it arose from the civility in public life around intimidation and abuse towards councillors and public figures, MPs, predominantly from the sad circumstances from Joe Cox. And this work has been welcomed, as you'll have detailed and seen in the reports. The report itself, initially there was a call for evidence to local councils, and that made a series of findings, themes and recommendations. The themes that were identified are set out in your report at paragraph 5, and you'll note the figures there around the experiences of members in public life. So 88% of respondents have experienced abuse directed to them, with 98 of those councillors having experienced it on multiple occasions. Regrettably, this wasn't new information, but certainly this had to be gathered to inform the future work. The report itself identified 5 themes: variability, targeted abuse, personal and democratic impacts, vulnerability and normalisation. Those are all set out within your report. And from that, the LGA was able to come up with 7 recommendations, some of which will require change in legislation and updates to legislation, some of which can be driven forward by the LGA and local councils. So we very much see this as a platform of a wider piece of work that will be coming in the future. In relation to the first recommendation, this was for councils and partners to take more responsibility to ensure safety and well-being for councillors. The LGA is to continue to monitor the progress of this work. The third recommendation was for the police to have more consistent approaches nationally in dealing with abuse towards those in public life. Recommendations 4 and 5 were somewhat linked in relation to the withholding of home addresses. It is to be noted that the monitoring officer is able to hold a sensitive register of interests and the personal addresses, but this is very much by exception, and for this to become a change across the board would require that legislative changes. There is a recommendation 6. It's made that social media companies are to take ownership in terms of supporting councillors or those in public life for the prevention of abuse that they may receive on social media. And that is something that nationally we have for councillors and monitoring officers. There is a growing trend. And for recommendation 7, that was for the LGA to set up a working group with the relevant government departments to address the issues around abuse and intimidation. So that is a very much a brief outline of what the report set out and the findings there. And locally, as the Chair has indicated, this isn't really anything different from what we already know, and it's how we go about addressing this. On review of this report and the work continuing to be done by the LGO, the monitoring officer has identified a need to further enhance the existing arrangements in place to support councillors and to continue to promote high ethical standards. This will include updating guidance for councillors on the topics of personal safety and the development of a personal social media toolkit. I can add that since the writing of this report, work has already been done to develop that with our colleagues in health and safety and our comms teams. In relation to the 7 recommendations, one of the points that came out of this was for the LGA asking for all councillors and MPs across the country to sign the public statement in support of their work, in a call for action for the relevant government department to form a working group and to support the campaign for Debate Not Hate. You may have already seen some councils have already picked this up. The recommendations are set out at page 20 of the report at paragraph 3, and today the Democracy and Standards Committee are asked to note the work of the Local Government Association on the campaign and receive further updates from the monitoring officer on the campaign and the Civility in Life public life programme. There is also a recommendation to full council. Chair, I don't propose to read that all out. I trust that members have read that, but I will take any questions on that report should any members have any questions.
Thank you. In 5.2, subsection 3, the last line, it said stand for reflection. I'm pretty sure that was a typo for stand for re-election. And I can assure you there are some councillors who are having second thoughts as a result of the level of intimidation that's going on. This is something I have to say that I totally support. I have several times petitioned for councillors to be given the permission to withhold their home addresses. At the moment it's not legal, and it is, well, sooner or later a councillor or two is going to get killed. And I hope that we can regularise the law before that happens. Questions from members? Well, Councillor Fedorovic first.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also very, very much in support of this. I think I've actually already been speaking to Councillor Smithers about culture and both like internally, but obviously like there's an external trust part of that as well, and how we can build that. I did have a couple of questions. So just on a couple of recommendations that the LGA have put forward. So the recommendation 3 about sort of the police and their involvement. I didn't know if the police have been informed of this report, the local police, and just what is expected of them. And also if we could, in the other sense, find out from our local police what sort of support is usually given to MPs. So, I mean, actually, you've kind of outlined that a little bit as well, Chair, but in terms of, so councillors know if something happens, what they should do, and some process around that. That was just like a quick question. Do you want to come to that, and then I'll go on?
Thank you. I'm quite happy to take that question. In relation to the police, again, as identified within the report for the LGA, there's variability in terms of and inconsistency in terms of how each police force addresses that. In this locality, we are looking to have a personal safety protocol in place for our councillors, but also work with the police collaboratively so that we can link in with our police liaison officer around standards matters, whether that's for public safety, should I say. Because what we find is there's a piece of work really for the monitoring officer to do to educate the police around the criminal sanctions that come with the harassment. Too often, historically, and again, this feeds into the work that's been done, it's being brushed off as a civil matter, and you're in the public domain, public life, and that's to be expected. But actually, since 2021, we have noticed a shift in that. But what we don't want to do is lose all of that learning. We want to continue to share knowledge and best practice to make sure that in the same way that our officers are protected, councillors feel protected too.
You had another question?
Yes, just to sort of finish those points. Really, I kind of wanted to say, I do really think both internally and externally that abuse is very much stemmed from a lack of trust. And I think that, well, trust and respect. And I think looking at both our member relationships, but also outside of with the public, building up that trust with members of the public, that's kind of built into some of these principles and some of these elements. But I would really be interested in looking at that in more detail and like how we can get members and officers to work more collectively on how we build that trust with members of the public. I mean, I've just mentioned there's a couple of bits from the speech that were really interesting. So the Nolan principles need to be made real on page 70. I just thought that was really, really interesting because we've got a lot of these, but actually us as a local authority, we've got a duty or a calling really to consider how we can implement those known principles. Like, what does that look like in the chamber? What does that look like for all of us? And I think that is something, that's sort of one of the things I've been discussing with Councillor Smithers. But I do really think that we need all of us to start thinking about it and feeding in. And hopefully, us as leaders, we can start pulling some of that together. But I think that will only really come when we start to sort of unite and find some of the connections, because we're all passionate about lots of different things and we've got different projects and things that we're prioritising. But that needs to happen from within, and then we can kind of shine that out. But I really do hope that's something that we can I'm really happy to see this coming forward right at the start of the year, and we can start fresh, hopefully.
I have to say that the threats are a bit broader than lack of trust. The threats I've received, which are quite serious, was because I voted against a planning application that someone wanted. That's not from lack of trust or lack of respect, that's just an attempt to intimidate for personal gain. That's been there always, whether the politicians are trusted or not. It's whether or not the politicians can be influenced by threats of violence. There was another question, Councillor Keane.
Yeah, again, I really welcome this. I think this is a really good thing, and I'm sure the Labour group agrees with that as well. And I'd be happy to be part of any working group. I think it is important that every party and independent members have some say in this, and if there is a working group, I'd like to be a part of it. But I'd like to, there's a couple of things about the reporting mechanisms I'd like to see. There have been incidents that some of my members have been, I don't think they've been treated as seriously as I would have treated them myself. So I'd like to see if there's any best practice from different reporting mechanisms from unitary authorities similar to ours that we can implement, and sort of like to get a flavour of what the reporting mechanism might look like, and just to see what we can do to improve ourselves, really. So.
Do you wish to comment?
Nothing really to add other than to say that's absolutely something that we will take away. We already link in with lawyers and local government and the LGA and follow this campaign, but I'm certainly a big believer, and I know that Adele shares this view of sharing best practice and learning from that. So thank you for that comment and your offer of support to be part of a working group should that be established.
Do you wish to follow up that?
No, that was everything. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Maxwell.
Do I understand in this report that we actually are going to be working closer with the police? Because I feel in the past, when things have happened, personally to me and others, that the police haven't really taken it up. I mean, I'm not saying they don't, but they're not brilliant about understanding, particularly over planning applications, where it doesn't go for the developer, and then he decides to come along and let his anger out on you. And I think that when this has actually been brought up to democratic services, maybe it's changed now, but I think in the past they've just sort of been a bit blasé about it and don't realise that it does affect you. And the other thing is, I'd like to ask, are other councillors, is this going to be available to every councillor once it's actually agreed and printed out, that they have a copy of this so that they know exactly what their rights are, what they can actually do to make sure that this sort of behaviour does not carry on, because it's not just going away, it's coming out more. You know, it's sort of on a, I'd have to say in some cases it's on a daily basis where people are aggressive, and I think it's sad that their actions are as they are. But we are moving into a different generation now, and I think people feel it's acceptable, you know, to be rude, and also I have to say, in my case, I actually got attacked by 5 dogs, so I feel personally very strongly about the fact that we must make sure that people are aware of their rights. So if this document is then eventually printed for everybody, for them to have and what to do, that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. If agreed this evening, this report in a slightly updated version, the intention will be to take this to Council for approval and for the leader to make that public statement. But this, as I've said, is very much that first piece of work to springboard the wider piece of work. So the engagement with the police, yes, that is something that we would want to have their input on the protocol. What we find for monitoring officers, deputy monitoring officers and those that work in governance and standards is the police just don't always have the awareness around this. So we very much want to get that education message so that we have a protocol in place that is effective and does support councillors. It is very sad to hear of personal experiences like that, and sadly that's not uncommon. This piece of work we do hope will start that conversation around how we treat each other, officers and members, but also councillor to councillor, and how we deal with challenges from the public. That's widely recognised. And the social media toolkit is something that I do hope to be able to bring to this committee in the not too distant future for your comments on. And if it was agreed, that would be rolled out with all councillors with a training programme to support that, so that again you feel equipped to deal with those challenging behaviours that you sometimes experience from members of the public.
Could I just ask a further question? Is there a possibility that some of the instances don't happen during the day? It could be in the evening. I think we need to have a telephone number, a contact telephone number, where councillors can actually phone up should something happen, because we don't just work, you know, it's not just during daytime. You go to meetings in the evening and you just don't ever know. And I think that, you know, you just need to feel that you can actually contact somebody and speak to somebody about the incident that's happened, rather than leave it to the next day. So if there could be some sort of contact number, that would be good.
Yes, and we can look to build that in, and colleagues in health and safety are well versed in that, and we're working with democratic services as well. There has been a process in place. It hasn't been that widely publicised. So again, it's time for a refresh, and we hope this will be the opportunity to do that. In respect of public safety for any councillor or officer, my first advice would be, if you feel threatened for your own personal safety and there is an immediate concern, then you should always call the police in the first instance.
Thank you.
Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's an excellent report and a piece of work by the LGA, and I support it and all of its recommendations. I think we've all seen that the keyboard warriors who hide behind social media have made, I think, sometimes made proper debate impossible, and you're best to stay away from it, which is a shame. And there's a high degree of, we talked about lack of trust, but then the cynicism, but also I think there's an ignorance of what councillors actually can and can't do. People think that we can press a button and whatever they want to happen happens. So it's a shame. I'm glad they picked up this anomaly that you can put on your election address, live in the vicinity, but 21 days later you're going to have to give your address and possibly your business address too if you happen to own the business premises. So I think that anomaly definitely needs looking at. I had a case of what I call it a stalker, somebody who phoned me about 14 times in a short period and turned up, wrote me about as many letters, long letters, and turned up at my door a couple of times. Didn't even live in North Northamptonshire, but he turned up. He was never abusive, this person, but it took too long for me to get a cease and desist letter sent to him. I asked for it a number of times, and it just took too long for us to act on that, in my thing. Another thing, if you're a social worker and you have access to a list of addresses that you should not go to on your own, that list is not available to councillors, and we're quite likely to walk into that same address on somebody calling us and be at risk. And so whilst obviously the list is confidential, there must be somewhat, and we can't always know, we can't check every person we go and see, but there should be some way of us knowing what addresses we might be at risk. And a suggestion for us as well, I don't know if any of you have seen it, but for the Queensway councillors, they've instigated their own phone number with 3 options, A, B and C. If you so you press A if you want to talk to one of the councillors, B if you want to talk to another, and C if you want to talk to the third councillor. That could be done for all the new wards after the election, and that could be a permanent number set up by the council and publicised so that personal phone numbers were not at risk. And of course, it would also mean that if a councillor changed, you still had the same phone number, which would be quite useful for communication with people. So that's something that perhaps officers could look at. And maybe it's also worth asking councillors when and where they hold surgeries and keeping a list and supplying that to the local commander, so that if there was an issue, they would know that there was a surgery going on and might be. And I mean, obviously, in terms of, we need to find a way to educate people about this. But one thing I'd like to see is for the recommendation to be slightly improved in 311. We're asking to note the work, but I would have thought we should approve the work or accept the recommendations. Noting the work is fine, and signing the debate not hate thing is fine, but I think we should accept the recommendations publicly, just to show our support and our the fact we are included. Thank you.
Following from what Councillor Lorman has just said regarding home addresses, I do know of one very good councillor who, when he was told he had to put this is when the Register of Interest was expanded about 10, 15 years ago. When he discovered he was going to have to put his home address on there, he quit. And we lost one very good councillor because he was not prepared to risk having his home address because there were a number of people who didn't like him. And he thought it was not safe. Since then, I've learnt he was wise. Councillor Coleman, you're next.
Thank you. Through the chair. Right, I'd like to reiterate what a lot of people have said on recommendation 3, but I'd actually ask if we could strengthen it a little. I know you've mentioned the fact that it isn't just councillors, but it's officers as well. But sadly, it's become apparent recently that a parish clerk in particular was threatened quite frighteningly. The police were called out, and nothing has been done about it. It was considered, it had been noted, but wasn't necessary to follow up. And I know that particular clerk has been quite scared by the whole thing. So I'd like to see that we could include within that members of staff as well at parish level to keep them safe as well where the police are concerned. Are we able to do that, please?
In relation to the work for the town and parish councils, for this particular recommendation, we couldn't look to amend that wording in this particular report, but certainly for future work, just because I know some of the work that we're already doing, we are linking in with town and parish councils, so whilst as the principal authority, we're responsible for our councillors, but there is a benefit of working with the town and parish councillors and their clerks. So there could very much be some shared learning that we can pick up and to make that, to document the support that this committee gives to the town and parish councils in the future. We can certainly incorporate that. I can think of a piece of work that we've got, which I'll touch on in the next report, where that can be brought to a future meeting.
Do you wish to make any further comment on that?
No, I appreciate the comments. Thank you very much.
I'm aware of the matter you're talking about. It's not something we can discuss in public. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, actually, I look forward to this report because it's very, very good. Like Dorothy and everybody's saying, I am worried about the parish councils now because we are finding now where residents are getting quite violent to a lot of members. So I'd like, if we can, really do something about that, and especially down to towns as well. Facebook has always been a problem. I find at the moment, being on the planning, we seem to get some nasty things put about us. I know everybody's probably has the same issue, but when it comes down to family, I feel it's, that's it. We really need to look at that more. That is my biggest issue, especially when someone threatens your family.
Thank you, Chair. I know that Leslie watches this from NCALC, lots of our meetings and our council meetings, so I'm sure she'll be interested in this. But I certainly meet with her and Danny regularly, so we'll raise that as part of our meetings and ask whether there's any work that we can do with the town and parish councils on this campaign and make sure that it's then implemented in the town and parishes as well, so that we get a wider spread of it.
Sorry, Chair, can I say one more thing? On some of the parish councils, they're looking at, I think, which is quite a big issue, as having their photos on all notice boards, councillors. Now, I feel this is quite wrong, because I think it's sort of putting us at a point where people, I know you've got your names, addresses, you can go on, click on, but I think something to put on a notice board with our faces, I think we need to look at that, if possible.
Through you, Chair, that would be a decision of the parish or town council and the proper officer, which is the clerk. So you should just speak directly to the clerk.
I would like to comment that I agree with Councillor Fedorovic that lack of trust and respect is part of the problem, but there's also the historic situation that people feel that they can intimidate their way to a successful outcome for them. And from listening to councillors around the room, it seems that any councillor who's done more than about 10 years as a councillor has had at least one serious case of this sort. And I hate to see us getting to the point where we end up having to issue people with stab-proof vests when they get elected. But we're going to have to change the direction of travel at some point. Very sad situation. Are there any further comments or questions from anyone? Oh, Councillor Maxwell again.
Well, I feel part of being an NNC councillor that you have to, it's part of, to me, I see it part of your role as a councillor, that your telephone number and your address should be available to the public. Now, a lot of you may not agree with me, but that's the way I see it, because we're not given a personal telephone which we can just use for council work. We're expected to use our own telephones to do this work. But I think equally, when you're talking about photographs being on notice boards at various places, I see that as a two-way thing, because I think some members of the public, when they want to see you, they haven't got a clue what you look like. And I think that it's quite useful to have a photograph so that they can actually put you to that photograph. If you don't like it, then you take it off. But one thing that I would like to see happen is that when we answer letters, we use our home address to answer the letters, right? We do not have statutory or sort of NNC heading paper that we can actually use as part of our work. And I think, but then if you did use it, where does the letter go to? So if it goes back to where you're actually representing East, whatever it is, Kettering, Wellingborough, whatever it would be, you then got to go and collect that letter. I'm not sure how we can get round that. I've just written a letter today, and you put your address at the top, and then you realise that it's, I don't know, it doesn't actually give you a lot of protection either. You know, where you, when you write a letter from NNC, it actually sort of, yeah, there is a protection. Like the officers, we wouldn't have a clue where you live at all. None of us. We wouldn't even know your personal telephone numbers. No. But for councillors, we are left, that is one of the reasons why we're left wide open, because the public expect us to be contacted. They can contact us on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve or even Christmas Day, which they have this year. So I think, you know, it is an issue that somehow it does need addressing.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Maxwell, for that. It's very enlightening to hear your experiences. I think we take for granted that councillors will predominantly use email, but of course you will still be contacted by postal, so that's something we can explore. And what we would strive for is a consistent approach, but we would very much need to take that away and speak with our colleagues in comms, because it isn't as simple as deploying an admin assistant to facilitate the post for all of our members. But again, feeding at the comment that Councillor Keane made of what is the best practice, what are other councils doing, and councillors' approach that's been taken. So thank you.
Are there any further comments or questions from members? Okay, I'd like to go to the recommendations now. On page 20, 3.1.2. I support this wholeheartedly. Oh, Councillor Lorman?
I was going to suggest an amendment to 311 after campaign, approve the recommendations in principle.
Well, we've already noted, no question about that, the report. Which wording do you wish to change? It specific?
Just add, after campaign, approve the recommendations in principle, or accept the recommendations in principle.
Well, we don't have the power to accept them. It's full council that would have to, and we're recommending to full council that they do. Am I technically correct? Yeah. So we can accept them, but it doesn't hold the council to them. Whereas if full council accepts them, than it does.
We're not actually, we're saying we support the campaign, but we haven't actually said we support the recommendation. So perhaps it should, in that say, recommend to full council that they accept the recommendations in principle.
Well, let's read through what the recommendation is. That the leader of the council
No,
signs...
I'm looking at 311.
Sorry?
I'm looking at 311, not 312.
Yeah, but 311 doesn't carry any actual weight.
That's why I'm going to change it.
There's nothing we can do at this council that carries weight on this on this committee that carries weight on this matter. We have to recommend to full council that they support it and accept it, which is 3.12.
Chair, if I may, through you, just to provide some clarification, I think I understand the point that's being made there. So whilst it's not within the gift of this committee to make that decision on behalf of full council, yes, to note the work of the LGA in the campaign, but what appears to be omitted based on what Councillor Lawman's saying there is that the full council will agree, accept the campaign and the work of the LGA, because when we read the recommendations at 3.1.2, it's saying that the leader of the council will support and sign the public statement on behalf of the council and then commit to the following. I think that what we're trying to get to is a form of wording that acknowledges that this council commits or accepts the work of the LGA, going a step further from signing the public statement itself, if I'm right in my understanding of that.
If we want to actually add any extra weight or extra recommendations, they need to be as an amendment to 3.1.2.2, because that is what goes to full council, and full council is the sovereign body on this matter. So if you can propose an amendment to 3.1.2.2 that gives the effect of what you wish, then that will have weight. But if we try and amend 3.1.1, then it doesn't have any effect.
It's fairly easy. Then there's a word campaign in 3122A, and so we just add and accept the recommendations in principle to that line A in 3122, and officers nodding, so that presumably works.
Right. Did you get the actual proposed wording? I'll second that proposed amendment because or adjustment rather.
I got up to the word principle. What did you say after that?
That was the last word.
He's forgotten that.
Accepts the recommendations in principle.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I think we all agree
Chair,
with...
Sorry, Chair, just for absolute clarification and maybe simplicity, if we can look to the wording to commit and accept the following, and then it goes on and reads. So it would just be the insertion of the word and accept, so rather than just commit.
That's even better. I'm happy to accept that change.
That's why she's a lawyer.
Right, so we are going to recommend to full council the amended version of 3.1.2.2 to commit to and accept the following, and A, to support the Debate Not Hate campaign and accept the LGA's recommendations in principle.
Yeah.
The B, C, D and E remain unchanged.
Yeah.
Right. With those amendments to the recommendations, I propose that we accept 3.1.2.2 and so recommend to full council. Okay, is there a seconder for that? Okay, right. All those in favour, please raise. That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. For something we all agreed on, that was difficult. Reminds me once that the longest debate I ever had on a parish council was about where a 2.5-inch high sundial would be, one side of a path or the other, 3.5 hours, including a site visit, and 6 weeks after it was installed, someone snapped it off. Right, next. Item 6, Code of Conduct, National Learning Case Studies, page 65. Camilla again.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for your time listening to me as I go through these reports. This report is the National Learning and Case Studies. It has been agreed at earlier meetings that we will bring regular updates to this committee to share best practice, but also essentially lessons learned. So this report is at page 65 of your papers through to 68. And it just highlights some of the goings-ons in local government relating to the world of standards and governance. So at paragraph 5, you have an outline there that the chair of the Standards Committee in Public Life, Lord Evans, his term of office came to an end on the 17th of October 2023. A copy of his speech is shown at Appendix A for your information, and you will be aware that Lord Evans has been very much an ambassador for improving standards in public life during his tenure, and the work to be done by both government and good practice to be adopted by local councils, most notably the LGA Model Code of Conduct and the improvements that that's brought about in standards. Next, we have an update in relation to Birmingham City Council, which I trust you will have all be well aware of. It's been well publicised, and you'll see there that there have been 2 Section 114 notices issued by the Chief Financial Officer and a Section 5 notice issued by the Monitoring Officer. Most of that, as I say, is already out there in the public domain, but the reason for the inclusion of this particular update is around support between councillors and officers, and I think that touches on some of the comments that have been made this evening. So I would like to draw your reference to, on your attention to paragraph 6.9, where there has been a report through this piece of work where senior officers have said they're not always felt to be supported by senior politicians. And at 6.6, the report of Grant Thornton, who emphasised that it is essential that the council has appropriate governance arrangements in place to ensure that officers are able to fulfil their functions without concern as to their position. Governance is very much a national topic, and as you'll have seen, other councils are finding themselves in a similar situation to Birmingham, and it has prompted the discussions around the mechanics in local government, governance arrangements, and what could have been done to prevent that. So I thought it was really helpful to highlight to you some of the observations that were made by Grant Thornton in their very detailed report. Looking more locally, we have a paragraph 7, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority in relation to a standards matter. And this was considered by a subcommittee of the Audit and Governance Committee in November 2023. And it related to the Mayor sharing what was considered to be exempt information, which may have revealed the identity of an individual. That in itself brought about a number of complaints, 2 complaints which cited that there was a toxic culture and bullying behaviour within the authority. The 3rd complaint alleged that the Mayor had failed to respect the role of officers and the officer decision-making in the information that had been disclosed. An independent investigation took place with an independent investigator appointed, and the conclusion of that report was that the Mayor had been found to breach the code of conduct relating to civility and disrepute. This matter was, as I've said, then considered by the subcommittee, and at the conclusion of the subcommittee submissions, the Mayor did express regret for the upset which had been caused and apologised unreservedly to those who he'd given reason to complain. The subcommittee, after hearing the reports and the complaint itself, did make a recommendation arising from that, which was for the Mayor to issue a written apology and for him to consult with the monitoring officer around the wording of that to the complainants. It was also for a reminder for the Mayor not to repeat that behaviour and agree to appropriate training with the Chief Exec, which should include HR practices. The subcommittee did go one step further and made a recommendation to the full council that they review and improve the induction process for new mayors taking office, and that the Audit and Governance Committee review the Constitution in regard to the lessons learned from the panel's process and provide recommendations to the Combined Authorities Board. Standards being certainly something that's close to my heart. That is a piece of work where we are looking very closely at the outcomes and the findings from that. Whilst it is a recommendation for you to note this actual report itself today and consider any additional recommendations you would like to make outside of this arising from the contents of the report, I would like to give members the reassurance that we are looking at that and seeing if there's anything that we ourselves as NNC can pick up in terms of member behaviour, member conduct and member training and induction processes. Chair, that is the report. I'll take any questions that any councillors may have.
Right, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the report. I requested this a while back, that we have regular updates on standards issues across the country where they are relevant and important, if you like, the test cases, so that we're aware of how the case law is developing. I'm sad to say that the situations described here are not new. It's merely that they are getting more publicity than they did previously. I'll open it up for questions now, if there are any. Councillor Maxwell.
I see this as a two-way thing, actually. I think sometimes I don't think necessarily that the councillors are aware that they've actually been rude, you know, or stated something which wasn't appropriate. But I think sometimes, officers aren't always clear either about the way they actually conduct the investigation. I think that the issue could be that more transparency. I think that if there was more transparency between the officers and the councillors, that would actually make life a lot easier. I don't think you're always aware of what is actually been said. And I have to say this, talking from experience myself, that sometimes councillors are not always informed about if an officer isn't particularly happy about something. They're not actually, until it's too late. You know, sometimes I think, you know, it would be better if the officers actually made it known sooner rather than later, so that something can be done. I think it's a difficult one, but I think in some cases, I think officers sometimes may get the wrong end of what is actually being discussed, and not necessarily realising that it could be interpreted wrong. I just think that there should be a lot more openness between councillors and officers, I feel that I don't think it's acceptable for any behaviour which would upset an officer. And equally, I think sometimes officers ought to be more aware where councillors are coming from some cases. Thank you.
Chair, through you, just to reiterate the points that we've made earlier this evening around the trust and how we build those relationships both internally and with our external partners. The point that you're touching on really there goes back to the member officer protocol, and that's something within the gift of this committee as well as the wider council. We can look to make sure that that is fit for purpose, and that we continue to have those open and transparent conversations, but with an organisation still quite as new as this, we are still working into those practices and raising awareness. I do hope that the member officer the member training induction programme that we hope to launch, certainly pilot later on this year and roll out for next year post-elections, will again highlight the understanding and awareness of the role of a councillor, the role of an officer. We see it at town and parish council level as well, where new councillors may come in and they don't fully understand their role and remit and that of the clerk, and we as officers sometimes struggle with getting that balance right too. So I think that's a really important piece of work that we can feed in as part of our induction programme, and I'd like to think that we'd have engagement across the whole council for that.
I'd like to make one comment, was that obviously we're 2 years into this, and I'd say that probably mistakes have been made, but not necessarily been aware of it. So I think anything which would actually have some sort of feedback, or it would be positive. Yeah.
Are there, Councillor Lorman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I mean, in terms of the two cases that are here, obviously the thing that comes out of it is training and education. And in the first one, to know what is confidential, what is not confidential, how it can be handled is important. In 14 months, 16 months' time, we'll have new councillors, no doubt, and we need to be ready for them. In the second case, I may be wrong, but I think Dr. Johnson had no direct experience of elected post, and again, that was training that was probably lacking. But so I think it's important, and maybe some senior councillors can input into the training that's going to be, point out where we find the pitfalls, may help officers in constructing the induction programme. But one thing that's interesting in Lord Evans' speech on page 75, in 2 paragraphs there, he highlights just about everything. And I think the coming thing that may be a problem is artificial intelligence. We've all seen videos made that purport to be somebody else and aren't. And the ease with the computing power that's around now and the skill that some people have, there is a danger that things may be fabricated, and quite how we're going to guard against that, I'm not sure. And I hope a lot of work is being, not necessarily by the council because it's too onerous a job, but I hope work is being done, and if there's any input to be had centrally, it'd be interesting to be part of that.
I'd make the comment that social media and artificial intelligence are just an amplification of what's always been there. Fake documents that existed throughout written literate history. The fact that it's got someone's face saying the words shouldn't really make much difference. If it's fake, and you should have mechanisms for chasing it down. Panicking over the change in the technology, I suspect, means that we're not dealing with it properly as a society. But that's another issue. Right, we've got Councillor Coleman, followed by Fedorowicz.
Thank you. Through the chair, I think actually it's summed up on page 76, the paragraph beginning second and finished in organisation. And it states it's where people are comfortable discussing. And I think that is so crucial, because sometimes you think, dare I bring that up? Am I naive about it? Is somebody going to actually correct me about saying it? And when you say it naively, you almost want to follow it up with an apology in case somebody is offended by what you say. And I think in this day and age, we want to have freedom of speech, but it's actually almost stopping you saying what you want to say for fear of upsetting people and breaking the code of conduct. And I think if we could actually have that confidence to speak to people, to actually ask if we're on the right track, and we don't mean to offend by saying something, and not people to jump at us and say, you should know better. Because some things we say, as you all went on that training, things change. They've changed dramatically over the last sort of 5 years, and terminology has changed. So I think it's quite good to be aware, and I just felt that short sentence there summed up everything on that page for me. So thank you very much for writing the report and clarifying it, but it would be good to have to know that we can speak freely. Thank you.
I point out that one of our town councillors was arrested and spent 8 hours in jail last year, was blocked from attending town council meetings because someone was offended by something that he said, which the Crown Prosecution Service has now said there is no case to answer. So the hope that you can speak freely seems to be a hope rather than a reality. He has made a formal complaint to the IOPC, and I hope he's received an apology from Northamptonshire Police, I understand, but I suspect he'll want a lot more than that. Councillor Fedorovich.
Thank you, Chair. It's been really, really interesting report reading this and seeing all of these sort of case studies sort of brought forward. But like you say, I'm sure they've been there for some time. I already mentioned some of the things about the speech earlier, but I really kind of just wanted to come to a couple of things that sort of summed it up for me. Top of page 72, generally turning politics into something many ordinary citizens do not want to be involved in. And that, for me, especially when we're talking about trust and the council that I want to be a part of, I want people to be excited to be a councillor. I want people to be excited to be part of something that is changing lives and is such a force for good. And it does make me sad that I do think that quite a lot of people don't want to be associated with the council because there's that fear of there's a lot of negativity at the moment, and I think that's why I'm so heavily focusing on trust, that we need to kind of break that down. The only way we're going to do it is with trust and transparency and being really honest. And I think the social media toolkit side will really help, because I have found engaging with people, especially those that are a bit volatile, and saying, let's have a chat, and being really honest about things, and it really does help. And it shows that we're really on the same page, that we're not the other. We have to all be a part of the same team. So, yeah, and I want people to be involved in politics. But yeah, so page 73, members of the public still have no redress when there are standards failures at a local level. I thought that was really interesting, and not something maybe that we can take forward in a, I don't know whether we need to do that in a formal way or if we could take it forward in a formal way, but thinking about how we could address that as a council could be very interesting, in that a lot of the members of the public, if they have an issue with something or if they want to challenge something, there might be something that we could do formally to say, right, okay, well, maybe we have some way forward of a lead councillor or something like that, trying to address that or trying to have some transparency. Maybe not a formal thing, but just something informally, if we can kind of bear that in mind, that it's just a kind of respect to the people that we look after, I guess. And then page 77, there is a responsibility on all of us to be leaders. And I kind of want to leave it there, to be honest, because I think it kind of shines out. Thanks.
I have to say that the prospect of having the police turn up at your door at 11 o'clock at night because you said something that someone else didn't like, and taking you away and locking you up for 8 hours is, shall we say, somewhat discouraging from entering public life. Councillor Marks.
Yes, I mean, there's also the fact that some people stay out of public life not because of fear of what will happen to them, but of the fear that it will affect their families. I mean, I've had these discussions, I won't give any names, obviously, but the response I get is, well, you say what you like because you're a Ronin, to use the Japanese word. You know, you're on your own. They can only hurt you, they can't hurt anyone else. You have no living relatives that they know of and so on. With other people, then they are afraid of saying something because of what will happen to their families. You know, we all know of the case where the elderly mother collapsed. You've already raised it. And other things can happen to family members because of something you've said. So it's very easy for someone like me, but not so easy for a family man.
I can give that an example of that without mentioning names. One councillor was associated with something offensive that went on a website. Nothing to do with him. He just happened to be one of the moderators on that website. This was about 4 years ago. And he had threats to his life. He had to change his appearance. He had to leave the area. His child was abused at school and he lost his job. And he had nothing whatsoever to do with the offensive comment, which was on a website. And he wasn't even on duty as a moderator at the time when it was there and before it was removed. Nothing to do with him, but because his name was associated with the website, damn near ruined his life and that of his child. I think people ought to think on that. I think that, I'll be honest, I think that Lord Evans doesn't see the other side of the problem. Right. The recommendations are that we note the report and request that officers monitor the progress of matters referred to and keep the committee updated. I think we can all agree to that. I propose we note that. All those in favour? Yeah, that's unanimous, thank you. Consider the recommendations it wishes to make arising out of the contents of this report. Well, I haven't actually heard any recommendations at this phase, but I suspect when we have a further one, we will have had more time to grow into this role, and I think there may well be, because there certainly there are problems, there's no question about that. Okay, well, that's that item dealt with, item 6. And now we have Councillors' Code of Conduct Statistics. I have to say that I'm very impressed by how few cases there are. When I went back to when the system was first introduced over 10 years ago, we had a flood of cases. One particular parish council in East Northants, I think it was, generated over 300 cases in 1 year. One parish council. Would you like to lead?
Thank you, Chair. Members will be pleased to know this is the last report you'll be hearing me speak on this evening. It is titled Councillors' Code of Conduct Statistics. I think it would be better placed to title it Local Pitch for future reports. This report is to update members in respect of the activities relating to standards in Northamptonshire and also give you information about the work that's been undertaken by and on behalf of the monitoring officer. I trust that members have already had the opportunity to review the report and are familiar with the assessment and the complaints process that we've adopted here. At table 1, you will see that there is a recording of the complaints that have been received in the last, effectively, a year. And what you will note is that there were a significant number of complaints that were received over the summer relating to one particular matter, which I will come to. There are some other complaints which are ongoing pending assessment due to changes within legal services and the staffing arrangements. There is, they have gone outside of our usual periods for when we would like to respond to those complaints. One of them relates to a criminal investigation, which is why it's had to be halted. and the others are awaiting information and finalising of that assessment. Whilst this is a report that we've said that we will bring on a 6-monthly basis, I think with the Chair's permission we would like to bring a more regular update to the committee. Before I move into that, I will firstly address the complaints that were received within June and July, and they're shown at entries 15 through to 18, which relates to a NNC councillor. The full details of the complaint haven't been published in this report due to the confidential nature of the complaints, but we have set out a summary at paragraphs 4.9 to give you some information relating to this matter. It relates to a councillor Twitter page where a post was made in relation to Pride. It's saying that it actually says discretionary, that the post was said to be discretionary, that should be discriminatory and contrary to the code. An assessment of the complaints were undertaken and a recommendation of local resolution was made, requiring the councillor to remove the social media tweets or posts and undergo training on the topic of equality and diversity and inclusion to be delivered by external professionals, to undergo social media guidance to be delivered on behalf of the monitoring officer, and to offer a public apology. Those recommendations have since been complied with and the matter has been closed in respect of that particular complaint. In terms of the actual reporting, as I touched on there just before giving you the update on those complaints over the summer, there are some improvements that are currently underway in respect of the future reporting. The purpose of the improvements is to be able to give further details to members, give you more valuable information and intelligence so that you have a clearer picture of what is going on locally in respect of standards. So what we hope to be able to do is provide you with a high-level summary of each complaint, the relevant paragraph of the code that is engaged, and trends. What we're looking at as trends. Social media has always been the big one in the last couple of years, and more recently member officer relations has been on the rise, and that has been steady for the last couple of years. And whilst we see it and the monitoring officer sees that, we think it would be really helpful for you to be able to explore that and inform the further work of this committee. We also hope to be able to detail the outcomes and an outline of the reasons. And whilst we won't go through the full details of the reasons, we can, again, give you that high-level summary. So it just gives you further information to understand what's happening, because a table with some numbers on doesn't really give you enough information. So we are working on our system and making those improvements, and they've been underway since October, November time. There are a number of complaints that are rejected and discontinued, so whilst the Chair has been pleased to note that there is a quite a low level of complaints here, don't think that accurately gives the picture of the number of complaints that are at least attempted to be made or where they can be signposted. So it may be that we receive complaints relating to particular planning committees, things like that it's not suitable for a standards matter and it's signposted to another source. I think it will be really valuable for this committee to hear a little bit more about that and whether that will inform some of the more elements that we need to pick up, whether that's training with officers, training with members, or just raising awareness of the work of the council generally. So I've touched on that at paragraph 5, training and development. On behalf of the monitoring officer, I've had the pleasure of attending 2 strategic town and parish council forum meetings attended by local town and parish councillors and clerks, and that has been a really good session to be part of. It was simply to just give an awareness of the work that we do in respect of standards, but following on from that, we did have a number of clerks and councillors reach out to us to say, can we get involved in terms of delivering and supporting training, to say, what do we do for code of conduct, a little bit about member-officer relations, and also the work with the Association for Local Councils, Leslie. We have meetings penciled in to see if there's a joint training session that we can deliver to the town and parish councils to really get that message out and improve standards, because whilst we're here speaking with NNC councillors, the standards regime that we consider applies to town and parish councils also, so we consider those too. And noting the limited sanctions and outcomes available for us through the standards regime, we have to be very creative in terms of how we improve standards. And one of the ways to deal with that is through education. So it's something I'm personally very passionate about, and the Association for Local Councils shares that view. So I look forward to bringing future updates about the work that we'll be doing with them. Chair, that is the report in summary there. The recommendations are set out at paragraph 3, and it is for the Democracy and Standards Committee to note the number of complaints received and dealt with, and that the committee receive further data in relation to the number of complaints received and dealt with in respect of the Code of Conduct complaints on a 6-monthly basis. As I have outlined, should the committee be minded to, that is something that we would be able to bring a more regular update should you see that as fitting for your work programme. Chair, that is the report, and unless there's any other questions, well, I'll leave it to you for any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Addison, you had your hand up.
Thank you for the report. 4.9, you would expect me to raise this, Chair. Just exactly how was this matter dealt with? Was there a subcommittee of this committee called, or was it just an investigation? This councillor, I would suggest, brought this council into disrepute because his comments weren't just seen locally, they were seen nationally and internationally. And he brought an awful lot of hurt to a large number of people within our community, including our members and including officers of this council, with his comments. And I personally do not feel that this was dealt with in a proper manner, and he should have come before a subcommittee of this committee.
Chair, if I may, of course Adele's welcome to add anything as monitoring officer on this. The complaints that were considered in respect of this particular matter were considered through the local assessment procedure. They were not subject to an independent detailed investigation that was then presented to the subcommittee. That was it was a complaint that, as you'll have seen there, for the date of the complaints and the date to the outcome, there was a lot of time spent on that. The view that was formed following that detailed assessment was with regard to the powers available to a subcommittee. So the powers available to a subcommittee mirror those of the monitoring officer, save for the sanction of censure, which is effectively a public statement to openly say that we do not agree with the conduct of this particular councillor. In this particular instance, the leader of the council had in fact made a statement at the outset of the complaints being triggered. So it was felt that there were no additional sanctions that would be available to a subcommittee, and it would be disproportionate to refer this for an investigation with regard to the costs involved in the investigation and the subcommittee. But it was a very challenging complaint to consider. I will say that it did go through the assessment procedure, and we also met with and consulted the independent person as part of that process who endorsed the recommendations before that decision was made public. As you know, the councillor in question did offer that public apology, and that was then made at full council subsequently.
Councillor Keane, you also had your hand up.
Yes, I'd like to know how many independent persons that we have, how you become an independent person, and what training an independent person would be given as well.
So we currently have 3 independent persons. I believe some of them may have already attended this committee before, but it may have predate my time attending this committee and time with the authority. The independent persons apply through advert to become independent persons. We are very fortunate that we have 3. I believe they are from our former borough councils and they have a term of office. Their appointment is considered by this committee and then would be approved by full council.
Sorry, what training do they have as well?
Sorry, they have received training from the monitoring officer and I believe they receive independent training. I can't remember the name of the training provider, but there is a training provider out there. Yes, thank you.
Councillor Brackenbury.
Can you just clarify the different, the outcome, no further action, and then there was another not proceeded with? Presumably, is the not proceeded with, the complainant doesn't carry the complaint any further, doesn't proceed with the complaint?
Yes, for that one in particular, it was slightly different. The no further action ones were simply considered, assessed and deemed to be no further action, whether that was that the code wasn't engaged once further information had been provided or there wasn't sufficient evidence of a breach of the code. In relation to that particular code from March 2023, it was initially investigated, assessed, should I say, and there was insufficient information. The complainant was invited to provide further information but was not forthcoming and the file was closed.
Thank you.
Councillor Lorman.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have any parishes in my division, but I know somebody who does. Given that we've got, I think it's 116 parishes around, I'm really surprised that we've only got 3 reports here, particularly given the feedback. I just looked at one parish council and only 2 of the 8 councillors have got register of interest on their website. So there's things like that. I have attended a few parish council meetings and quite often there's a lack of understanding of what's a prejudicial interest and what isn't. People, there's a few nods going on of people who probably people resolutely deciding that they're going to contribute and vote on something that directly affects them because it directly affects them. I welcome you, the fact you've been to the parish meetings, but to me, there's clearly a need for more education and more enforcement of the regulations with some of the parishes. It's hard work, I know, and it's wide-ranging with so many, but you know, there clearly is a need. But I am surprised there's only 3. Maybe they, I don't know, find a way of preventing the reports going in internally, but I'm certain there should be some.
Councillor Maxwell.
Well, I think this chart is really good. I think, you know, showing us what exactly is being done in relation to complaints coming forward. But I think in parishes, what tends to happen is that rather than bring a complaint forward, the councillor on the parish council just disappears, and therefore the complaint doesn't have to come forward. So I think sometimes things are like brushed under the carpet, and I think residents are not aware of what they can do about it. I think residents tend to feel intimidated by what happens in parish council meetings. I'm not saying always, but I think sometimes that is the case. And I think there ought to be more transparency so that the residents understand what they can do and how they can go about it. Because at the moment, my views are, for the five villages I represent, that some of them don't seem to have much say at all. So I think in future we need to make it more transparent that that they do have rights. That's my view. Thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments from members? In that case, then we'll go to the recommendations. Right, it is recommended that the Democracy and Standards Committee notes the number of complaints received and dealt with in respect to the Councillor's Code of Conduct, and receives further data in relation to the number of complaints received and dealt with in respect to the Code of Conduct on a 6-monthly basis. I'm happy to propose that recommendation. Is there a seconder? There's a seconder. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. That is the last item on the agenda, so I therefore declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much for coming out on an unpleasant night and for the positive contributions that everybody in this room has made. Clearly, it's a high-quality committee. I'm very proud of the members.